So he really just made it easy. We did like an interest-only loan. But that was the turning point because I don't know how long it would have taken for me to get into a property. So luckily, I just got creative and found a way.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the Gentle Art of Crushing It show, where we focus on learning and sharing with our listeners all there is to know about how to create success in our lives. This show stands on the shoulders of giants. Our mission is to empower and inspire our listeners to create the life of their dreams whilst having a blast in the process. Let's celebrate life together. Welcome to the show.
Awesome. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of The Gentle Art of Crushing It. And today I'm so honored and excited to welcome Zeona McIntyre as our guest. Zeona, I think, and obviously please correct me if I'm wrong here, and I don't want to steal any of your thunder. We will hear all about this, when you kind of introduce yourself, but you've gone from $50K in debt to financially free through Airbnb in the short time of 2 years. You're now an expert in midterm stays or midterm rentals. You've been featured on, I believe, not one, not two, but three Bigger Pockets episodes, maybe even more that I don't know of. You're a speaker and have been a speaker at BPCon, I think once or twice. You're an author, co-author of the book, The 30-Day Stay. Pretty impressive background. What else is there that we don't know? Why don't you go in there and tell our guests, first of all, welcome again. So happy to have you here. Thank you for your time. And what else don't we know? Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you do in life and maybe real estate.
Yeah, so I've been doing furnished rentals through Airbnb's platform for 10 years. And so I have 12 units across four states.
Four countries. Nice. I love that.
Yeah, but I was a co-host for a long time, which just means like an Airbnb manager. And when I did that, I did manage in other countries. And so that's where I was going with that. But basically, I had 60 units over 5 countries. And so I've done a lot of out-of-state investing, out-of-country management. So I know a lot about automation. And I think that's a real key part to doing furnished rentals.
Very, very cool. And what were those countries, if you don't mind my asking? And how'd you land there? I'm very curious to hear about that.
Yeah, so U.S., obviously, Greece. Yeah. I had a sailboat there that I was managing, actually, which was live at the Athens dock and stay on the boat. And then there was South Africa, which I got through Bigger Pockets. So the thing is, you start getting on these podcasts, and I think a lot of times property managers build just in their local community. But I was on these podcasts, and I was just kind of like, I'm going to just say yes, right? Why not? So I had a Cape Town place, I had something in Mexico in San Miguel de Allende, and then Spain. There was a place kind of off of Valencia, like more.
And how often do you go to these different places? I particularly love South Africa for many reasons, but one of them being that's where my wife and I met. So, actually right outside of Cape Town. So very fond of South Africa in general, but definitely Cape Town has a special place in our hearts.
Yeah, so actually I didn't need to visit any of these places to manage them. So I didn't. But I have been to a lot of those places. So I got to know the owner of the boat, the captain that owned that boat, because I had done a trip with him before I started renting it for him. The Cape Town place, I'd been to Cape Town, but not to his property. Spain, same thing. And the Mexico place, I've never been to that town. I've been to other parts of Mexico. So,
very nice.
Yeah.
Very
Make
cool.
it all work.
I'm curious, before you go into your preferred maybe success story that I'd love to hear more about. You've obviously done a whole lot of different things, right, in life and real estate. I'm curious if you had a definition today, or for you today, right, what does success mean? And then the follow-up question to that is kind of, how has that changed over time, throughout your life? I'm curious if it has. For some people it does change, for others it doesn't. I'm curious what that means for you and how much that's changed over time.
Yeah, I think it's very confusing in this world of real estate, right? So most people in our community, they use money or number of doors to define success.
Couldn't
so
agree more.
It's easy to kind of like fall into that trap of being like, oh, well, I must need more doors or more cash flow or more net worth or whatever. And so I get lost in that sometimes. But when I am really like deeply looking at myself and like introspective, I think that success is more defined by how do I feel every day? How much spaciousness is in my life? Like, am I doing things out of ease or out of anxiety and stress? And so those are hard. They're not as quantifiable and they're hard to measure. Yeah.
Totally. And do you feel like you've found success where you're at now? It sounds like it, but I don't want to assume.
I think I'm a little out of balance, to be honest, right now. And the reason is probably because this book just came out and we're doing a lot of promo about it. So I'm grateful for the opportunity. The book is great. And I need to probably use the holiday time to come back to myself and create boundaries again.
Holidays are always good for that, but then there's a lot of family, a lot of eating, and a lot of drinking usually involved, so not always super relaxing. But while we're on the subject, why don't you tell us a bit about the book quite a bit more and plug it here? I'd love to hear more about that.
So the book, like you said, is called 30-Day Stay. It's a real estate investor's guide to mastering the medium-term rental. And a medium-term rental is anything over 30 days, so hence the name. What we tried to do with that book, at Bigger Pockets, every book has to stand on its own. So if somebody picks it up off the shelf and never read a real estate book, they need to understand all of it. So while we do deep dive in a lot of kind of the basics, we also really get into everything that you would need to know to operate a really good medium term. But a lot of it applies to short-term rentals too. So I think it's a good book for a lot of different people. And then the last thing is we really tried to make it case study heavy and a lot of stories, because I think people learn well through story form. It's like more memorable than if you're just reading a textbook. So we didn't want it to feel like that.
Totally. And that book is available today, right?
It is at Bigger Pockets.
Wonderful. Can't wait for our audience to go pick up their own copy of that. And of course, we'll make sure it's linked in the show notes and all that, just to get more eyes on it. I'm excited. I have my copy on the way. I have not read it yet, but I'm excited to read that book. Awesome. And of all these different things that you've done, which story or which one aspect of your journey so far would you call out as your biggest success, and why?
Interesting. I think there's a lot of little turning points, right? There's like places along the way where if somebody said no to you or the door got shut in your face, like where would you be today? And I think one of those turning points for me was when I had to go get my first loan. So when I started my Airbnb journey, I was doing arbitrage is what they call it today, but basically it's renting out a place and then subletting it to Airbnb guests. Sometimes I would live there with the guests, but a lot of times I was just going between the two apartments. And so at a certain point, I knew I wanted to be as legitimate as possible. I wanted to own, I wanted to be able to claim equity and be in that real estate game. And so I, at the time, didn't qualify for a loan. All my income basically was Airbnb, and it was back in 2014, and that was just not recognizable income to any lenders back then. Yeah, totally. So I was in a sticky situation, and I got this idea that I would reach out to one of my old landlords who we'd stayed friends, and he is an investor, and he's got, I think, 20 properties. And so I had heard that he'd sometimes wanted to help kind of the new kids coming up, right? So he was doing some private loans. So I talked myself into it in the shower and had all my points, and I met him and we talked about it, and it was so easy. I was really thinking I would have to hard convince this guy.
So this was to get a private money loan, right? Just to be clear.
To buy my first place. Yeah.
Awesome.
So he really just made it easy. We did an interest only loan, but that was the turning point, because I don't know how long it would have taken for me to get into a property. So luckily, I just got creative and found a way.
Very cool. And would you say that's the most valuable lesson you've learned in that experience and that journey? Is it needing to be creative, or was there something else?
I think that's one of my values. It's just something that I really enjoy that makes real estate fun. It's nowadays I'm back to creative financing, and I'm really trying to dig into seller financing, as loans are really expensive right now, and
totally.
and mortgage assumptions and things like that. So I find that really fun. I love that even though I can feel like an expert, quote unquote, on an area of real estate, I can be a total novice in so many other areas. Yeah. So there's so many ways to like get creative and continue to learn and grow in this space.
Yeah. I think, I can't remember who I heard. I think it might have been Pace Morby. I think I heard him once say that one of the biggest problems with real estate is that there are too many ways to be successful, right? And find success. Yeah. And that's kind of what you're describing here, right? So maybe next year we'll have the book on, creative finance from Zeona McIntyre. We'll see.
Oh, I don't think so. Pace is working on that book actually with Bigger Pockets. So I'm like waiting to read it. That's what I want.
Very, very cool. And just to look at maybe the flip side here, do you mind sharing with us like an incredibly difficult experience that you've had in life and kind of what you learned from that, right? One of the reasons we like to ask this question is sometimes our listeners and audience hear all these success stories and they kind of feel like, well, that's great, it's them, it's not me, or they've always had the right cards stacked well for them or whatever it is. And it's always interesting to hear these more difficult times and kind of how you go through those, how you get out of those. So if you have one that you are comfortable with sharing, I'd love to hear that.
Sure. Yeah, I have a partnership that went sour. And so I remember this was like a friend that was a loose acquaintance, I guess. But I had just come back from St. Louis and I had just furnished a property and it was renting super well. And I ran into him at a sandwich shop and I was just like glowing and beaming about this place. And he got really excited and said like, I would love to invest with you. And so we kind of just casually talked about it and he said, I have $10,000 to start. And these properties were cheap. The property I'd just come back from was like $70,000. And what I ended up buying with him was only $50,000. So $10,000 was a good amount, So we kind of shook hands and said we would do it. And even though we did draw up some contracts, he never actually signed them. And I wasn't thorough enough to get through that. So what happened, of course, is that by the time we came to the closing table, he mysteriously didn't have any money. And so I ended up having to come up with all of it, which luckily I had, but wasn't the plan. Then all the way up to a year out, he had excuses at every turn. He sold a property and I thought I would get money then and I didn't, and all these different things. He always had an excuse. And so eventually I had to kick him off of the property, but it involved lawyers and it was incredibly stressful for me. It turned out well and not even that costly, but just for that period, it was really, really stressful. So
you had an official partnership in place, I guess? Just want to make sure I understand, because in the sense that this person is not, okay, you're both owners, because I was wondering,
we were both on the deed, so I had to kick him off
got
of it. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was wondering, if this person is not pulling their weight, right, and not, bringing the funds, if that was agreed to, how are they still part of the picture? But I guess the deed will do it, right? If they're on the deed.
Yeah, sure. Totally. And he had been managing the property, which was kind of our deal too, that he would get part of it for that. And so there was even a point where he wouldn't give me control of the house. And it wasn't within driving distance or walking distance. Totally. This was states over. So I had to get my handyman in there to change the lock. And oh man, it was a lot. It was a lot.
So what do you do differently now for if you were to go, on a new, joint venture or partnership, story and adventure? What do you do differently now?
Well, luckily that didn't sour me on partnerships, and it definitely didn't sour me on doing things with friends. I still own properties with 4 different people, not all in the same property because I like to just have just 2 people on a deal. And then I've got partnerships with all kinds of other things that I'm doing that are little businesses. So I love partnerships, but I think it's just very important to have stuff in writing and be very clear. And then also just to feel like you understand the character of this person, because you're not just buying in with them in that moment. You're probably going to be with them for, 10 years or longer.
Yeah, totally.
So feel like you really understand what you're getting into. Yeah.
And you mentioned doing deals or partnerships with friends. So you're in the camp, I guess, of, working with friends or partnering with friends like this is an okay thing. And I just asked, and I'm smiling here for those who are not watching on YouTube here, just because, I feel like there's always these 2 camps, right? With people talking about doing deals with friends or family. It's like, love it or hate it, do it or don't do it, right? And it sounds like in your case, you've been successful there, which is great. Do you have any tips for how to make a friendship, or how to keep a, friendship healthy while doing, business, I guess?
I think having clear communication is key. So just feeling like you understand how this person like fights, I guess, and how they I don't know, get through issues, because yeah, there's going to be hard points, but then I also feel up front it's really important to designate roles and responsibilities. So that's part of what we have in our contracts, is just so that hey, you're taking over this part and I've taken over this part, and this is what I expect of you. And then also laying out all the worst case scenarios. So it's like if one of us die, or, if we won out of the deal, do we sell the property? Do you give the other person right first? So having all that worked out ahead of time just makes it cleaner at the end.
What happens when your friend is not doing what you set out in the contract, right? Aren't those conversations a little bit more difficult or sensitive than if it was just with a quote unquote, pure business partner?
Yeah, I guess. That only happened to me that one time. So other than that, I feel like I've been just a better judge of character, I guess, or I don't know. So yeah, it hasn't happened again. Basically, I don't always love being the main person. I don't like partnerships sometimes when I feel like I'm the one who's more responsible, because if something is not as good as you predicted, then you sort of feel like you're the responsible person and the other person got dragged along. So yeah, I don't have the perfect answer. I just think that there's only so much we can do on our own, and there's only so many skills that one person has, right? So if you divide and conquer, if you have somebody else, then they give you a whole nother set of skills that you're probably not good at, right? So finding somebody that you're compatible with but very different just makes it so much easier. And then we only have so much time in the day. So I have all these partnerships, and I just feel like I can do so much more now with other people helping me along. Yeah,
totally. It's that saying, right? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, right? So that's awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Sounds great. And if I just, shift the conversation a little bit here, knowing everything that you know today, right? If you were to go back in time when you were, 15, 18, whatever, getting started, right? What would you do differently?
Wow. I don't think I would go to college. I don't think I would go to college because I didn't get much out of it. And I got a lot of debt out of it. So there's that. And I'm past that now, but I think that that's like a big hump for people to get out of. I would have house hacked right away. So I just think that that's the best thing you can do, is like the moment you leave your parents' house, get into a house that you own, have roommates or whatever you're going to do, and just live for free. It just coasts you through. You don't really need to do a lot more than that, because if you have time, everything builds over time. Yeah. So probably those things. And maybe I would become a real estate agent right away, because it took me, I don't know, I didn't do it until the last couple of years, and I've been in real estate like 10 years. And I just think there's so many advantages to having that license and seeing things first, and the way that you look at properties differently. And yeah, it's just,
how do you deal with being a licensed realtor if you invest in, across the country, but also across the globe, right? Because you'd have to be licensed, I guess, in every state where you operate and all of that. I'm just curious to hear that, because you're one of the first, at least, that I've encountered that really seems to speak very positively about being an investor and an agent, right? Oftentimes, right, it's also one of those very, tense, topics where people are like, it doesn't bring you anything to be an agent if you want to be an investor. You don't need it, don't do it. But it sounds like you're, kind of in the opposite camp.
Yeah, so the first thing it gives you is a big old discount, right? So if you buy in your own state, you get whatever the commission is back, right? So in Colorado, it's like almost 3%, depending on the deal, 2.8. So that's a big discount. And so I had bought a few things here, but I thought, I'm mostly investing out of state, so it doesn't matter. But actually, you still get a discount out of state. It's just not as big. So you get 25% of that agent's commission. And so that works out well. So I like having it for that. But then it's also just that I think real estate agents respect you more when you're an agent. I don't really know. But
I could see that.
A reciprocal thing a little bit. So I do think working with agents out of state, it's a little bit easier. And I feel more confident looking at, like I told you right before we got on here, that I was looking at this contract in Florida, trying to figure out, I'm doing a seller finance deal and I'm just filling in everything without using an agent. But because I work with contracts here in Colorado, they're very different, but at least I understand a lot of it.
Yeah, I'm
So
sure
I
a
think
lot
it's
of
helpful.
the content and the framework is,
Totally.
carries over from state to state, right? Even though they're actually different, but like a lot of the items in there is very similar. Oh, that's awesome to hear.
Yeah. I
Very,
love
very cool.
discounts.
We all want discounts. Well, hopefully this seller finance deal works out for you. Hopefully you can get
I think it is going to work out. I'm very excited about it.
Awesome. That's very, and is that for another medium-term rental?
Actually, I'm selling a property that way because for my clients here in Colorado, I'm negotiating a lot of seller finance deals or loan assumption deals where they are the buyer. And so I'm talking to sellers and trying to talk them into it. And I don't really know what it's like to be a seller in that situation. So I was like, well, let me sell 2 of my properties to seller finance and then I will know. So that's what I'm doing. It's a little experiment.
Very, very smart move.
Yeah.
I love it. Very cool. I'm curious, Zeona, if, say one thing, right? What's your secret sauce, or your key to unlock success in life, right? What would that be?
Wow. I mean, my creative mind is definitely part of it. So I think I don't really get stuck on how everybody else does it. I always find my way, and my way is usually very different. And so I think that's really helped me through situations. And that's probably part of that like old adage where people are like, don't think about how you can do it. Just think or don't think about that you can't do it. It's how can I do it, right?
Yeah.
And so just trying to figure always out a way to make something happen. I almost feel like every place is a deal if you look at it through the right lens.
Yeah, totally. But what would you say to somebody, because that's a very, creative mind, a very open mind, right? Which is awesome. And it's obviously helped you this far, right? But if you're talking to somebody that is much more closed-minded, maybe non-success, mindset oriented, or the type, I've said this myself several times, like I'm not the creative type, right? So, I can't buy this deal off the MLS, okay, I'll just move on, right? And too bad I won't get it. Whereas it sounds like you might start thinking about creative ways to approach the deal, creative ways to talk to the seller and all that. But I guess what would you tell somebody if you were, talking to somebody like that, right? Just kind of, glass half empty, maybe,
Sure.
using all the excuses.
I think real estate is all about relationships. So it's not that you have to have all those things or you have to believe everything, but how can you find those other people that do and surround yourself by them so that you're starting to take on a little bit of that maybe more open or creative mind, or just partner with these people and they bring that part to the deal. And so, I'm a big proponent of like going to meetups and all these kinds of events where you're just learning and meeting more people, because investing can be like really lonely at the start. If you don't have any friends in investing, everybody thinks you're crazy and they might try to talk you out of it.
Yeah, networking is extremely important. I think, just like any endeavor in life, right? People make or break every single one of those. And I think it's particularly true in real estate, right? Or at least that's what I've experienced myself, right? So that's awesome to hear. And as we kind of, bring this to a close here, Zeona, I'm curious, and one thing that we like to leave our audience with is a book recommendation. So obviously 30-day stay, right? But a book, a book recommendation, and then like a tool or technology recommendation that you maybe use in your day-to-day that help you or have helped you, right? In the case of a book, maybe. That would and can help our audience. So what would those be if you have a book recommendation and a tech or tool recommendation?
So I'm going to give you something unusual you probably don't get. And the reason is that I read a ton of, self-help and like business books and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes you just want a break. And so I love memoirs. And right now I'm reading Will Smith's book, Will. And I think it's so inspiring. I mean, it's crazy how many times over he found success, lost success, just the way his mind works and the way he does utilize relationships and the people he surrounds himself with. So sometimes I think it's just great to have a mindset book. And I think that's a great one. And if you listen to it on Audible, he's speaking it. So
he's a narrator,
it's
right?
really fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's really animated.
I'll have to get that one. I'm looking forward to it. I love memoirs as well. That's my those are my go-tos for nighttime reading when I'm not like trying to focus and self-develop, I guess, during the day.
Yeah.
Right? So.
Well, you'll self-develop like sneakily because there's a lot of good tidbits in it. Yeah.
Very cool. And what about like a tool or a technology recommendation that you like to use? It could be anything that's helped you find success.
That's interesting. I think for like short and medium term rentals, it's all about automations. So I think there's just a lot of things people try to do on their own. And one thing that was like just a game changer for us is using auto messaging. So we use Hospitable, which is just a program that allows you to kind of program a few different messages. And so I have a series of 5 to 7 messages that all my properties and all my guests get. And that just gets ahead of them asking for different things. It's like we predict what they're going to need and we send it to them at the right time, a little bit before.
Very cool. And how much effort does it take to set that up, or is it pretty straightforward?
Well, the cool thing is in the book, I actually did all my templates. And so if people just wanted to copy paste, they could.
Nice.
But I always say, try to put it in your own words so that it sounds like it is you saying it.
Of course. Yeah.
But yeah, it shouldn't take that long. I mean, maybe
especially if you get the book. So yet another reason to get the book.
Get the book.
All the shortcuts. Awesome, Zeona. Thank you very much. And before we wrap this here, how can our audience help you, get in touch with you? What do you want to leave the audience with here?
Oh, that's cool. How do they help me? Well, I love seller finance deals. So if you guys have those, bring them my way.
And anywhere in the country?
Me. Yeah, because I probably have somebody for it. My main market is Colorado, but I'm open.
Very cool.
If you want to reach out to me, you can find me at zeonamcintyre.com is my website. And then Instagram is the one I'm most active on, but I'm on a lot of platforms. And so DMing me on Instagram, I answer all of my messages.
And what's your Instagram handle?
Zeona McIntyre.
Wonderful. Zeona is a great follow on Instagram. Well, awesome, Zeona. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to leave us with here before we call it a day? If not,
interesting. Yeah, I mean, I just always encourage people to take action. And if you're too afraid to, then find somebody that you can kind of get less afraid. So either, find somebody who's doing exactly what you're doing, somebody who's in your market that you want to invest in, that will give you just a little more confidence to take the next step.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, but this is maybe a full other episode that we'll have to record because taking action is a big mindset thing, right? And I think I love the example that you give, but even in that, right, there is an action step that one has to take to find and reach out to that person to help them take action, right? That might get them to a place where they're stuck again, right? So in my
it's
experience,
all about baby steps.
Yeah, the
just take micro bites. Yeah,
the smallest possible step you can take, even if it's just looking at Instagram for people that might do something similar to what you're trying to do. That would be the first step before you even think about reaching out or anything like that. So, but yeah, that's an awesome tip, Zeona. So with that, we're going to leave it here. Thank you so much for your time and all the value provided today. It's been an absolute pleasure and honor. We'll make sure to link all of your recommendations, obviously your book, your social, your website in the show notes here in description. And with that, thank you so much and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you, Zeona.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Another episode of The Gentle Art of Crushing It. It was an amazing episode. We know we sure learned a lot, and we hope you did as well. We want to take a second and thank you so much for viewing or listening to this episode. And please just know that we only ask for one favor, and that is to make this life magnificent. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.